Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Skylar Kuhn, and I am Assistant Director of Admissions here at Washington College. I'm very excited to introduce our three panelists who are all alumni from Washington College and involved in our Watershed program for alumni volunteers. All three of them are now working in the field of environmental science, and they will share how their time at Washington College helped them to launch their careers. Joining with me tonight are Kelly Fiala, Anna Windle, and Katie Walker. We will begin tonight with each panelist introducing themselves and asking some frequently asked questions. And then we'll end with a Q&A session. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to submit questions for our panelists. If we're unable to answer your question live, your admissions counselor will be in touch later. Keep in mind, if you submit a question anonymously, we will be unable to follow up with you as we won't know who asked the question. We've allotted 1 hour for this session, so without further ado, it's my pleasure to hand over the floor to our first panelist, Kelly.
Hi, everyone. As Skylar mentioned, my name is Kelly Fiala, and I am coming to you from Annapolis. I graduated back in 2015. So I like to think not that long ago, but I guess compared to the other panelists, maybe a little bit longer. I'm originally from Baltimore. I'll tell you a little bit about myself first and then talk about where I am. So I'm originally from Baltimore, Baltimore County, if you're familiar with that area. I majored in environmental studies. We now have an environmental science at Washington College, but I did environmental studies and then I minored in biology and anthropology. As I mentioned, I graduated in 2015 and I currently work for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. So I run our education program out of our headquarters here in Annapolis.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Windle. I'm from Elkton, Maryland, which is in Cecil County, Maryland. I graduated in 2016 with a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science with also minors in biology and anthropology. After I graduated in 2016, I went into a master's program at the Nicholas School of Environment at Duke University. I got my master's in environmental management. And WAC now has a 3+2 program with the Nicholas School of Environment. So I'm happy to ask any questions or answer any questions you might have about that program. And then after graduating in 2018, I went straight into a PhD program I'm located at Horn Point Lab, which is in Cambridge, and that's part of the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. And I'm in my 3rd year of my PhD program.
Awesome. And I am Katie Walker. I am from Laurel, Maryland in PG County. And I graduated from Washington College in 2017 with a Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Studies. I minored also in anthropology and earth science, as well as a concentration in Chesapeake Regional Studies. After graduating, I actually stayed on and worked at the college's GIS program, or Geographic Information Systems. So I worked at there for a year as a staff member before I moved to my current job at Chesapeake Conservancy, where I'm a geospatial analyst and project coordinator, working on Chesapeake Bay-wide restoration and conservation projects.
Great, thank you all so much. And again, thanks for being here and talking with prospective students about what you're doing now and how you got there. We are going to go ahead and get started with one of our frequently asked questions. And Kelly, I'm going to turn this one over to you first. So can you tell us more about your current job? I know you mentioned the company and your title, but what's your day-to-day like, and what are you doing in that job description?
Awesome, of course. So I personally feel like I have one of the coolest jobs in the environmental science field. So essentially, I have this really long, environmental education program manager, really long title. But if I have like a quick elevator speech, I run field trips outside with kids. So students 4th through all the way up to college students, actually taking them out on the bay, the local bodies of water that they are near, and connecting what they're learning in the classroom to like a hands-on environmental education experience. So I definitely love my job. And I think it kind of all started when I was at Washington College. I enrolled in a program called the Chesapeake Semester. So if you're not familiar with it, it's a semester long, basically interdisciplinary study of everything pertaining to the Chesapeake Bay. So you talk about the history, you talk about the ecology, you get to meet people that work in the field. And I always tell my parents that I feel like I learned so much in that one semester. And that was definitely a huge highlight for me. But I saw the benefit of that hands-on experience with the environmental field in particular. I think it's beneficial for any kind of field that you're going into to have some real life experience, but Chesapeake Semester definitely started me in that direction. So I started at Chesapeake Bay Foundation in the fall after I graduated from Washington College. I started in our restoration department. So I worked out at a farm, and most people don't know that Chesapeake Bay Foundation even owns a farm. So we have a farm. I did oyster restoration and tree plantings. And after my year-long term there ended, and I actually got that job through a connection with Chesapeake Semester. After that year-long term ended, I basically was like, I'm not leaving. Like, I know that I love this organization and what I do. So I moved over to our education department, where I kind of can do what I experienced in the Chesapeake Semester, but every day. So I work with schools, and now we're doing our programs virtually, which is different, but definitely fun, and still being able to interact with students. So that's kind of a little bit about my job.
I'll go next. So like I said, I'm a PhD student. So I've been a student my whole life. I never have, I guess, had a real job. But my official title is graduate research assistant. So I do get a salary. I get paid to be a PhD student. And I'm getting trained in marine estuarine environmental sciences. That's my degree program. So I work closely with my advisor, and I conduct research for my doctoral dissertation. So I do a lot of data collection, data analysis, writing, but I also participate in teaching, outreach. I present at different scientific meetings and conferences. I publish in the peer literature and collaborate with other scientists. And so I guess day to day, my research consists of field work. So I go into the field and collect data, and also a lot of programming and computer work. So, and I guess my research, if you're interested, is remote sensing. So I use remote sensing platforms such as satellites and drones to assess water quality in Chesapeake Bay waters.
Awesome. And so I'll round us out. And it's really cool, Anna, that you kind of ended on the remote sensing and that side of it, because so what I do is I'm a geospatial analyst. And as a geospatial analyst, as a geospatial analyst, I use a bunch of different data sets around water quality or best management practices, especially related to agricultural practices to help restore the watershed, to reduce nutrients, especially phosphorus, nitrogen, and sediment, from making its way into the bay and impacting the ecosystems that we have, especially looking at some of our fisheries and crab and oyster populations. So trying to make sure that what we as humans are doing on the land have as little impact on the water ecosystems as we can. And then looking to basically find ways of, where these practices could get put into place. And because there's only so much money to do implementation for restoration projects, a huge part of what me and my colleagues do is use these data sets that people like Anna go out and collect. And some of the data sets that we get to use, we help people on the ground prioritize where they should be putting these restoration projects in the ground, so that we're getting the most bang for the buck in terms of restoration and conservation.
Great. Yeah, all of the jobs that you do are so interesting. And I'm sure we have a lot of students listening to this who are trying to figure out how they can do this in the future as well. So thank you for sharing. We're going to go into our second question for our panelists tonight. And I just want to remind everybody too that if you do have a question, feel free to use that Q&A box whenever it comes to mind. So our second question is, how did Washington College's internship opportunities and out of classroom experiences get you to where you are today? And we can go again with Kelly first.
Great. So I took advantage of a lot of the opportunities, I feel like I did, when I was in college. There's a few internships that I definitely took part in, as well as some of the jobs. And I know that we'll maybe have questions at the end, so I don't want to take up too much time, but just highlighting a few. I did work at all of us are mentioning GIS, and if it's like a totally new concept to you, the way I like to explain it is taking data, so like graphs and points, and putting it on a map to make sense of things. So if you're like, I have no idea what they are talking about, that's essentially what GIS is. And there's different parts of that. So I worked in our GIS lab because I wanted a job, which is nice. There's a lot of on-campus jobs as well that you can take part in. So I worked there. I actually did crime mapping, which was not really like in line with my my field as an environmental studies major, but I learned a lot and was able to apply a lot of the skills that I learned into the rest of my college career and then into my current job. So very cool, neat opportunities. There are a few other internships that are available that I took part in, working with our environmental studies director. So worked under him, reaching out to previous alumni, all sorts of things. You can work in labs, and you can even do internships, obviously beyond the college as well. But I loved WAC, so I kind of stayed close to the college, and it was really easy. Like I never felt like I had to go out of my way to look for internships or look for jobs, which made it nice for me, especially as like a freshman coming in. I was like, I'm not going to go out of my way, but when the opportunities are presented to you in the way that they are and through the people that are able to do that, it's really easy to kind of get involved in that way.
Yeah, I think WAC has fantastic internship out of the classroom experiences. It's what I, kind of remember most looking back on my classes. I remember, taking a field trip to Cape Henlopen State Park in Delaware for one of my marine bio classes. I remember going on our research vessel, the Kalanectes, for so many different classes and collecting data and learning those field methods in the field. I did a summer course in Ecuador in the Galapagos and got credit for that for the environmental, my degree. But I think the major out of classroom experience that really impacted where I got to or where I am today is an internship I did the summer before my senior year. And so WAC is one of several schools that has an agreement with NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, and they place students to a NOAA affiliated lab or workplace all over the country. And so I applied and got accepted to work at the Rookery Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve, which is in Naples, Florida, which is partly federally managed by NOAA, part managed by the state of Florida. And I was a sea turtle intern. So I spent the summer monitoring different beaches on the Gulf Coast of Florida and collecting data and building cages around sea turtle nests to protect them from predators. And it was through this internship in that summer where I kind of developed the idea for my senior thesis. And so every WAC senior has to do a senior thesis or a senior capstone experience. And it's like a year-long project or paper. And so I got the idea through this internship. I even brought back samples back up to WAC and analyzed them in the lab at WAC. And so it was just an awesome summer, awesome experience. And it really motivated me to continue this research and kind of motivated me to apply to grad school and just made me a more confident scientist. So yeah, it was a great summer, and it's awesome that WAC has this kind of agreement with NOAA to do this.
Awesome. So when I was at Washington College, as I've mentioned, I definitely also worked at the GIS program. A lot of the projects that I got to do through there were pretty interesting. A huge part that also led into my capstone experience was working on the Harvest Directory project, where I got to look at the local food system. And through that project, I was able to call and talk to a lot of farmers that sourced and sold directly to customers. So a lot of farms, especially on the Eastern Shore, tend to do wholesale farming, which means that they just kind of go straight to a distributor for processed foods. But there's a number of farmers on the Eastern Shore that could support a more local food economy. And I was seriously interested in looking into that. So we actually put together a brochure and a website that people could visit. So if you were interested in buying local products, you could query and search and everything through this, which was really cool. In addition, I had an internship with the Sassafras River Association. And through that internship, I was able to kind of get a better understanding of what it means to kind of look at a really small community in terms of water quality, as well as just wildlife habitat, and being able to look at that community and say, you know, how can we interact with everyday citizens kind of, you know, at their homes, and getting people involved in environmental initiatives, getting people to understand the importance of the wildlife in their own backyard and their impact on streams that are in their community. So that was a pretty cool internship for that. I will also mention that through, I think right now it's called RACSI, the River and Field Campus, there's a number of internships that are available related to wildlife or biology, which is really cool. And my roommate back in college, and actually my current roommate, had a really awesome experience with the bird banding observatory. And so she was actually able to look at these truly incredible bird species. And when a new bird species came in that hadn't been seen by the observatory before, they were able to put little bands around the legs of the birds. And what these bands do is, as they fly and get kind of captured and resent back out into the wildlife by different labs and programs across the entire world, really, these observers can kind of look and see where the birds are migrating, and it helps a lot with being able to look at wildlife migration. So that's also something that's available.
Great, thank you. And I think it's great too that everybody mentioned internships that they had, because I think that's something that employers are definitely looking for these days in their, you know, incoming applicants. So my final question for you all before we start with the questions from our audience tonight is, what's one memorable experience from your time at Washington College? And again, Kelly, I'll go to you first.
All right, so I'm gonna kind of break the rules, and I'm gonna give two, just because I really feel like I couldn't pick between the two. I also wanted to give you guys a response that was kind of more environmental, and then one that's more just personal. So I think I mentioned earlier, enroll in Chesapeake semester, and by far the coolest like few months of my life. Granted, I'm like, 28 and I still have a lot of life left, but definitely one of the coolest semesters ever, being able to, go out in the field with professors. We even travel for 2 weeks in a country. We went to Peru at the time and compared an ecosystem, and you would think, okay, what on earth does the Chesapeake Bay and the aquatic systems in Peru have to do with each other? But the connections were pretty crazy and very, very, very cool. So definitely Chesapeake semester was a highlight. And then for me, and this is not something I ever thought, but I ended up joining a sorority at Washington College. There are 3 sororities, and I think for me, it was a great way. I come from a family of all girls. I went to an all girls school before attending Washington College. And so I just kind of wanted that, just a smaller group of friends. So I would say that my second favorite was Zeta Bid Day, just because you kind of make that family at home and well, away from home, I guess. But those were probably my top. And sorry, I broke the rules, but
Yeah, I had trouble answering this question because I've had so many memorable experiences. I think what stands out are my study abroad trips. So I mentioned I went to Ecuador and the Galapagos Islands, which was just amazing. And that was, I guess, the summer after my sophomore year. The summer after my freshman year, I did a trip to Tanzania for 2 weeks, which was also just amazing. And you just learn so much by traveling to other places, and I learned a lot about myself as well. I guess, could I have two too? Another thing that I really enjoyed was I had a part-time job in the admissions office actually, and I worked the front desk, and then I was a tour guide, and I just loved working there. I loved the people I worked with, and I just loved telling all the prospective students and their families how great WAC is. And yeah, so I think Kelly mentioned a lot of students have part-time jobs on campus or off campus, but there's a lot of opportunities to work on campus and, get some extra income and just take a break from classes and studying. And so many students do it. So it's definitely doable, which is something to think about too. But yeah, admissions was really fun. And then the courses they stand out in my mind when I think of WAC.
Awesome. Well, I think, Kelly definitely covered Chesapeake semester and how truly incredible that was. So I thought about a lot of the experiences that I had, and one really memorable thing that I wanted to talk about that actually was kind of just starting when I was at Washington College is the Eastern Shore Food Lab. And this is a program, like I said, just kind of started in 2018, so it's relatively new. But it's being headed by Dr. Schindler, who is an incredible professor. He's mostly focused on anthropology and specifically kind of looking at primitive foodways. And so his focus really was about understanding how food and the culture around food impacts the environment and just culture in general. And so the Eastern Shore Food Lab is, an awesome way to kind of explore something about the environment and something about culture all being put together. And for me, being part of, the inauguration of this program, I was able to spend some time that semester preparing for a dinner at the end of the year that we were actually having for the Board of Visitors and Governors. And what we put together was a charcuterie board of cured meats and cheeses that we actually were able to make ourselves. And so we started probably in January or February, and we learned how to butcher a pig, which a lot of people might be a little squeamish about, but it was awesome. And so you really get a healthy respect for an animal diet when you are a part of the process of breaking down the animal. And so we got to put together the cured meats and make things like salami and copa and sopressata. And then we learned how to ferment and make cheese and a lot of different types. And then we were able to display it with bread and cheese and kimchi and a bunch of other fermented foods that we had made from scratch. It was like everything from start to finish was something that we created. So that was a really cool experience for me.
Great, thank you all so much. So now we are going to switch to the Q&A portion of our night. This first question is for Anna. So Anna, can you speak a little bit more about your experience at Duke? I know you kind of mentioned it before, but what was that like for you? What was the transition? How were your courses? That sort of thing.
Yes, all great questions. I totally enjoyed. It was a 2-year program, so I was in Durham, which is main campus where Duke University is, for the first year. And then I got the chance to go to the Duke Marine Lab, which is in Beaufort, North Carolina. It's about 3.5 hours away from main campus. And I was there for about 2.5 years. I spent the summer after. But yeah, it's a great program. It's a unique program. So I think only 4 universities in the country offer this Masters of Environmental Management. So it's an NEM. It's not your traditional Masters of Science, like an MS degree. And it's very applied. You take a lot of courses. It's a much heavier course load than a traditional MS. And you don't have your typical master's thesis, you have a master's project, and that can be really, they make it flexible in how you create it. So I wrote my master's project as I would a thesis for a master's of science, because I wanted to continue my research. But people kind of made their master's project like a report, or they worked with a client and produced a product for a client, or if they were in education, they created a lesson plan or a curriculum. And there's different concentrations within the MEM program. So my concentration was coastal environmental management. There's water resource management. There's an energy concentration. There's water resource management. Did I already say that? Yeah. There's I think there's 7 or 8 different concentrations. And economics and policy is one. And so coastal environmental management students usually get the opportunity to go to the Marine Lab because it's on the coast and you're studying the coast, so it makes sense. But yeah, I'm trying to think what else would be good to tell you guys. Yeah, I don't know. I loved it. It went by really fast. Like I said, it was a heavy course load my first year. Second year was more so doing research on my master's project. But I totally think WAC set me up great for grad school. My senior thesis, I think, students aren't excited to do a senior thesis, a year-long project their senior year. And maybe I wasn't super excited about it either, but looking back, I'm so glad I did it, because it just gave me the experience, kind of put me one step ahead of my peers in grad school, because they had never done a whole independent research project by themselves, and I had. So I felt totally prepared. I felt, at the level of other people going into the program. So I definitely think the Environmental Science and Studies Department did prepare me for grad school. And yeah.
Thanks, Anna. So this next question is one that I can cover. So it asks to explain what the Center for Environment and Society, or CES, is, and what opportunities it provides for our environmental science and studies majors. So the Center for Environment and Society is one of our 3 signature centers. Our signature centers are something that WAC is known for. They're ways for students to get more of that experiential learning. That's, a big component of your education. So CES is actually available for all students to use, same with the other 2 signature centers that we have. But as you can imagine, it usually is a lot of our environmental science and studies majors utilizing those resources. But CES oversees those research vessels. So I know the Kalanectes was mentioned as one of the boats that takes students out onto the river and the bay for classes. Also that GIS lab that everyone's been talking about tonight, the Public Archaeology Lab, and the River and Field Campus, which is RAFC. And the River and Field Campus, that's about a 10-minute drive from our main campus. And again, students will go there for both classes, and then also they can go there for their senior capstone experiences to do independent research. So just ways for students to get a lot more field experience within environmental science. All right, so this next question asks, are there any out-of-classroom opportunities available for first-year students? So whether it's internships or opportunities at RAFC. Would anyone like to jump in for this one?
Sure, I can start. I don't know if Anna and Katie want to follow up after, but I will say, I think I mentioned earlier, like especially my freshman year, didn't go out of my way to look for internships. I was just kind of like settling in, getting used to being in college. But one of the nice things that we did is, your first year, you take a lot of like gen ed classes, which is perfect, even if you know what you want to study, just to kind of get that baseline. So I was taking biology classes, all sorts of classes with labs, which was great because some of the coolest experiences that I had were out on field trips with my teachers. So we would all like get into the college van or buses, and we would get to wherever we were going. And typically the places that they were taking us for these kind of like lab field trips were places where you could intern or even get jobs. So it was kind of like, they weren't saying it like, and here we're going here to, show you guys what this is about, so then you could get a job or an internship here. It was just kind of happened. And if you were interested in it, typically you were paying attention enough to know that they mentioned that there's internships and things like that. So I would definitely say, the teachers at Washington College and the relationship that they have with students was something that I will like never forget. They know you by name. They know what your interests are. You ask them questions in class, outside of class. You talk about things beyond school. And so throughout my college experience, they really did like get to know me, and they would send me emails with possible internships and jobs and things like that. So I will say freshman year, you definitely get exposure to that through things like lab field trips and even just, emails that are sent around the school about opportunities. But then they definitely continue to evolve, and you kind of figure out after you've done like your gen ed science classes and things like that, you kind of figure out where you want to go. I will say when I went into college, I knew that I wanted to be an environmental studies major. I had no idea what I wanted to do on the far end of that. I was like, I'll kind of figure it out as I go. I definitely want to do something with like marine life. But again, really had no idea what I wanted to do after. So I kind of figured that out through the internships that I was able to kind of claim during my time.
So I would also like to speak to this and say that definitely starting freshman year, there is a myriad of opportunities available. All of the professors at Washington College are also involved in their own personal research assignments. And most of them will have students, they hire students with stipends to actually help facilitate some of their research. And so there's a number of projects that go on with the professors there, and there's opportunities for students, and it doesn't have to be a junior or a senior. They do sometimes, they'll work directly with freshmen. As we mentioned plenty tonight, the GIS program, they actually prefer hiring freshmen because the more training you can get with the software, the cooler projects you can see throughout the time period over the 4 years that you're there. So it's one of the programs where, and a number of the things at the Center for Environment and Society, they offer a lot of positions. None of them really have any requirements for prior knowledge because all of the experiences, internships, and on-campus jobs are expected to be learning opportunities. And so it's equally available for freshmen as it is for a senior to acquire any of these jobs. And especially looking at something like RAFC, a lot of the professors, so we have Dr. Sherman, who does a lot of soil science. And so she has students go out and take samples of the soil and looking at the soil chemistry and how it's changed over time. And then they'll come back and do some data analysis to support her research. The River and Field campus itself is also amazing grassland habitat for a lot of the bird species that are native to the Eastern Shore. And part of what Dan Small, one of the staff members at the Center for Environment and Society does, is he actually does prescribed burns, which allows the grasslands to basically revitalize the habitat over time. And so they're looking at the management of this and how frequently should prescribed burns be done, when during the time of year should it be done. And so getting students out there and understanding that are some of the ways, we have folks out in the field, not just kind of behind the scenes doing data analysis as well.
Great, thank you. So this next question asks, how common is combining environmental science with an anthropology degree and why?
I will start there just because I totally did not go into college thinking I didn't even really know what anthropology was, to be perfectly honest. And the way I kind of like to explain it is it's the study of humans. And so it works really, really well when you pair it with something like environmental studies or environmental science. You kind of get the science aspect of things, which is what I kind of gravitate to as someone who loves science, and kind of dives into things like research and actually like getting to be one-on-one with animals. But the whole, the key to our environmental issues is figuring out how humans interact with our environment. So I honestly was not really, as I mentioned, familiar with anthropology. I took an anthropology 101 course with one of our professors, Dr. Schindler. And just like the things he brought, like stone tools into class. And I had another teacher who had also graduated from Washington College, and she was talking to us about her experience in anthropology. The beauty of it and the way that Washington College has it set up is that a lot of the classes that count towards your environmental major can also count, that you can kind of like double dip in a way, and they can cover both of your credits for those two. So I did not go in thinking I was going to be an anthropology minor, but I actually, because I kind of knew I wanted to go into environmental science when I came in, I ended up being able to do like fun things my senior year. I took like a sailing class. I was like, oh, this is awesome. And, it's really nice having Chestertown so close to the water. So that was just like one fun thing I was able to do because I was able to kind of do both in a way that I wasn't expecting. It's definitely helped me in my current job, having the anthropology minor. You might think it's like, okay, well, it's just a minor, but you really do get a new perspective on environmental issues, which I think is really important, not getting too focused on the science of things.
Yeah, I would add that it's pretty common at Washington College. I know a lot of friends who double majored or had a couple of minors. And I would say that one of the reasons it's fairly common or really easy to do this, even though it's not required, is just because, especially in the environmental program, a lot of the courses at Washington College are cross-listed, meaning that it is reviewed by more than one department. So even though a class is required and taught by an environmental studies or science professor, we have cross-listed courses in almost every department: anthropology, psychology, economics, business. We have all of these cross-listed courses, and it just means that you can kind of check the box on two different major requirements or minor requirements, which is why it's so common to have multiple kind of focuses. And I think it is a really big boon to be able to do this, because you walk away with an understanding of not just the really focused view on your specific topic, but you really do see how disciplines interact with each other. And moving away from the academic world, when you have a career, you work in a professional environment, there's going to be people from a bunch of different disciplines working on projects together. And Washington College does an excellent job of kind of setting that up by having so many cross-listed courses and recognizing that, we're not just going to talk about the environment, but we're going to talk about how the environment interacts with economics, or we're going to talk about how the environment interacts with psychology, which is really cool.
Awesome, thank you. So this next question is about students who are athletes in college and the opportunities that they get. So did any of you play any sports? If not, if you know someone who played a sport in college, were they able to get the same amount of opportunities that the non-athletes did?
So I did not play a sport. We are WAC's a D3 school, and I want to say like a third of the students, I don't know the statistics, but there's a lot of athletes. I was on the dance club, and so every night of the week, Monday through Thursday, I would have dance classes, and we would have a spring concert. So we would have rehearsals, and I was actually president of the dance club my junior year. So that took up a lot of my time. And looking back, I don't know how college students do it, because I would have classes all day, I would work, and then I'd have dance classes. Like I remember a dance class starting at 9 p.m. because that's the only time we could fit it in. But yeah, I think, so, and that's just the norm. Like WAC students do so much, and you don't have to. But I just feel like, you're an athlete and you're in this club and you're in this sorority and you're in, you have classes, you have major, double minor, like and people do it, and anyone can do it. And I don't know, I thrive when I'm busy and have a full schedule. So yeah, I think so. The question was if they were able to get the same amount of opportunities. Yeah, totally, and more. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was going to say my senior year roommate was on the rowing team, and he also had the same job opportunity that I had at the GIS program. And so like he was a computer science major, was on the rowing team, and had, I think at the time we were working like 15 to 20 hours for the GIS program. And so it was kind of having a part-time job and studying and being an athlete. And I think, as Anna did a really good job. It's you feel constantly like you're constantly busy, and looking back on it, you realize just how busy you were. But it never seemed like too much. I think everybody just stays pretty active, and one of the reasons it's as strong of a opportunity for athletes to have the same internships or experiences is because Washington College is so community focused, and everybody's on campus being involved with each other, honestly, whether it's through focus clubs, for environmental people. Like I was part of the Student Environmental Alliance. And so while I personally wasn't an athlete, I did a lot of Student Environmental Alliance, and I was a member of the campus garden. And so that's where I spent a lot of my kind of extracurricular time. So.
Yeah. So some people are like, it's not a sport, but I rode horses at Washington College. I was on our, I know, thanks, Katie. Katie's nodding like, yes, it is a sport. So yeah, you don't like play riding horses, but you are on the equestrian team. So I was on the English and the Western team. If you're not familiar, it's like the Western's like old school kind of trotting along. And then English is just like a little bit more refined. But I liked being a part of both of those teams. Definitely a little bit different than like a lacrosse team or a baseball team. I was definitely close with baseball players, and knew that it was really easy for them to like manage their time. As I mentioned in the beginning, teachers, their relationship that they have with students is so different than anything that I had ever expected. You have to get up in the middle of a class to go to a game, and your teacher like stops the lecture and says, good luck today. They know who you're playing. So it's like, it's really not, I understand the like concern about, okay, well, will I be able to manage anything? And what if I want to do an internship? What if I want to get a job? But as Katie kind of mentioned, the college is the time to kind of like find yourself, find out what you want to do, where your interests are. So there's definitely opportunities to dabble in all of those. If you're not like totally set on playing like a D3 sport in college, there are plenty of club sports that Washington College has, club lacrosse, club field hockey. So there's definitely ways to get involved. And even with that, varying degrees in which you can get involved, which is really, really nice.
Great, thank you. So I know a couple of different internships and trips, like the Galapagos Island trip. Those have been mentioned tonight. So are those included in tuition, or are there additional costs associated with those?
They are unfortunately not included in tuition, but I will say that it's a lot cheaper. The price is a lot cheaper as if you were going to go by yourself or with one other person. But they are additional prices, and I'm trying to think if there were any scholarship. There might be scholarship opportunities you can apply for. Maybe someone else can talk about that. But yeah, they're unfortunately not included.
Yeah, so I do know that there are scholarship opportunities available through the department, but there is something that I was a part of at Washington College is the Cater Society for Junior Fellows. And the Cater Society is, it's kind of like having a club or an honor society. And what this is just a community of students and a panel of faculty and staff. And it's really focused on individual research and just being able to explore research outside of the classroom and outside of your standard curriculum. And so through the Cater Society, it's like getting funded for research projects in a very traditional academic sense. And so you actually have to submit a project idea as well as a budget. And so it really gives you the skill to kind of be able to scope out, you know, what you can actually achieve under the research. And so I do know that through the Cater Society, one of the opportunities that some students have is if you're going to take one of these trips, you can use it and come up with an additional research question outside of any of the coursework that you would do, something that you're interested in, and you can work with a professor that would be willing to kind of help you figure that out. But as long as you do some additional research on top of what is available for the coursework, you can get funded for those trips. So opportunity there.
Thank you. Yeah, and I know too, you can always go to the Career Center also and apply for funding through them. This is a great question. So this student asks, at what point do I need to decide between environmental studies versus environmental science?
Oh, Kelly, do you want to go?
No, you can go.
That's a good question because when I started at WAC in 2012, they didn't have the environmental science degree. They only had the BA in environmental studies. So, but Dr. Sherman, who was the chair of the department, she told me they were working on getting it approved. So I started with environmental studies, and then halfway through, so my sophomore year, they got approved to have environmental science, and I switched to science. And so, yeah, I think so after your sophomore year, you can decide. I think there's some required courses in both majors, like in environmental science, biogeochemistry is required and field methods is required. So those you usually take your junior or senior year. But I don't think you need to, you don't need to decide that. And probably you could maybe wait until your junior year to decide on studies in science.
I would agree with that. And I would say, so the core classes fulfill both requirements for studies or science. So that's really awesome. And I would say like junior year is when you need to describe or to define it, because as Anna said, there are basically there's just a number of courses that require labs. And so those are basically, for most classes, you have like a 1 hour chunk of time 3 times a week or an hour and a half twice a week. But the labs have like a 3 or 4 hour lab session once a week. And so those have to be scheduled, and sometimes they're not available both semesters. So that's the only kind of hiccup for, you can't wait until your senior year to decide one or the other, because you might not be able to take one of the required courses if you wait that long. But as long as you're taking some of those lab sciences, or if you're taking a bunch of the lab sciences and end up wanting to, switch to studies, so you could focus more on some of the psychology or anthropology or economics courses. It's pretty flexible and fluid. Like I said, pretty much until your senior year, and then you do really need to have a have a plan there.
Thank you. So how involved are instructors in terms of noticing when a student needs extra help?
I think I've brought it up a few times, but that was like one of the really big things that I applied to like a ton of colleges because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm very indecisive. I was like, I don't know what I want to study. And I finally figured that out, but I was like, I really don't know where I want to go. And it was just in a simple interaction at an open house with one of what would soon become one of my professors that I realized how like they really do want to know you. They can tell, even when you don't want to admit that you're struggling with something, that you need help. but they have things like office hours, even outside of office hours. You run into them in the hall, you run into them in the dining hall. They're there, they're on campus, and again, they know you and you know them. So it's really, really easy to kind of reach out and ask if you need help. Kind of going off the major thing, when you're trying to decide between majors, conversations with your advisor and your teachers are like absolutely incredibly helpful. So even if you don't know, I think like most students, I think have decided by the end of their sophomore year, kind of the path that they want to take. But if you go to your teacher, you know, first semester, junior year, and you're like, I have no idea what I want to study, they're absolutely supportive of helping you along that way. So whether it's something as simple as like a concept you don't understand in class and meeting up with them after, or even like something as simple as, you know, going into and picking an entirely new major, it's really, really easy to kind of decide and make that choice with the teachers kind of being there as your guide.
Great, thank you. So this next question is about Chesapeake semester. So how do you sign up for Chesapeake semester? What's that process like?
So I'll take that one. In terms of the Chesapeake semester, it's an application process, and pretty much they won't take freshmen for Chesapeake semester, but starting your sophomore year, you can apply to be a part of the program. And there's a simple interview with some of the faculty and staff members that will be involved in leading your instruction during the program. But they send campus-wide blasts. They'll come in and talk to you in some of the general classes about what the Chesapeake semester is and how you can apply. And the interview process is really simple. It's honestly just another way to kind of practice interview skills as you kind of lead into your professional careers. So it's very thoughtful in terms of that. But it's just kind of, you know, why are you interested in the Chesapeake semester? And you know, what are you hoping to get out of it? Things like that. And then they have their selection process. And I think what we didn't mention is that it literally does take up an entire semester. And so when it comes time for like your course selection, instead of selecting courses like you usually would, it's kind of, it's very similar to a study abroad where you would, you know, you have a different set of classes that you're available to take if you would be studying abroad in any other country. Same thing here is you kind of have 4 prescribed classes that are available to you to sign up if you get selected.
Thank you. So I know we've talked a lot about water so far, and this student wants to know, is the environmental science program mostly based around the water, or can it be based in the forest?
So there definitely are like programs in at certain colleges where there's like a major emphasis on the forest and forestry. Because of Washington College's location, it's definitely more water-based if you want it to be. So there are definitely certain labs that we did. We went out and measured the circumference of trees to try to figure out how much CO2 they were absorbing. So there definitely are ways that you can incorporate that into your study. Now I get to run, you know, sailboats, power boats, and take students out. So like that's always been kind of my thing. And I think that's why we're all talking about the water and kind of focusing on that. But I think one part of that is its location, the college's location on the Chester River. And now the new building that's down right on the water, which is like, I'm super jealous that that's there now and I have to go back and visit. But there definitely are opportunities to kind of take things and look at it through a forestry lens as well.
Yeah, and I would add that the River and Field campus provides opportunities in terms of, you know, more of that, the water and the agricultural science, I think are 2 things that we have a big focus on, and that's just kind of the environment that you're in plays a huge role on what professors are kind of brought there, because then because we have such a big focus on kind of out of the classroom experiences and things like that. So that's plenty. I would say with the River and Field campus, you know, we mentioned the bird banding. Dr. Krochmal, one of the biology professors, does turtle studies, which is really cool. He kind of puts little remote backpacks so that he can figure out how they get from some of the temporary ponds to their more permanent ponds throughout their life cycle. So there's plenty of opportunities to get involved in a variety of different things. But I think, as Kelly said, there are schools that have a more focus on forestry because, especially things, it's just geography wise, there's not huge swaths of forest land near the campus. So it's a little bit harder to get out of classroom experiences focused on that.
Thank you. Yeah, those remote backpacks sound really cool. I want to see a picture of that. Sound very cute. And I also wanted to mention, Kelly mentioned that the Center for Environment and Society has their new building. So that was in that slide that we had at the beginning of this presentation. So that's CES's new building right there on the riverfront part of our campus, opened just 1 year ago. And that's where we have wet labs and also those offices and some teaching classrooms for that center. So this is going to be our last question for the night. And I think it's a great one. So what were your most impactful courses that helped you in your career today?
Sorry, Anna. It's like I see her on mute. So you guys all know now I've done Chesapeake semester, but I actually would not, I don't think, have my current job today at Chesapeake Bay Foundation if it were not for Chesapeake semester. So I'll try to keep it short, but long story, very short. What we do on Chesapeake semester is, you're spending time with a certain group of people. They've all applied, been accepted for the program. You've got certain teachers that you're interacting with all the time. And we went to a Watershed forum in West Virginia. And I will never forget, I was asking some former Washington College alumni who were presenting at that forum. I was like, oh my gosh, like, how did you get this cool job? And it wasn't with Chesapeake Bay Foundation, but it was with another environmental organization. And he's like, I did this thing called the Chesapeake Conservation Corps. And essentially that's how I got into CBF, was through this program, the Chesapeake Conservation Corps. I would have had no idea had I not been at that forum. I mean, maybe stars would have aligned in a different way, but I wouldn't have had the same opportunities and the same experience also doing Chesapeake semester and talking about the different classes that I took, whether it was in the application process, applying for jobs or things like that. But really, like, that's what kind of spurred my trajectory, was Chesapeake semester and wanting to do the work that I do today. So definitely grateful for that.
I think a course that I still use, or, I use the things I learned in that course, is field methods that Dr. Fox teaches. It's a required course for environmental science, but she, almost every lab, we're out in the field learning different field methods. So we're learning how to deploy instrumentation off a boat. We're in the river collecting samples. We're using the instrumentation she has in her lab. And I just remember when I was at Duke in my master's, I took a wetland class, and I knew the field methods that we were using, and then I used some of those same methods for my PhD research. So that class really has helped me throughout my career.
So I would say one of the classes that I found surprisingly impactful is environmental economics. And I would say that that's because I am not a math person, I'm not an economics person, I'm not a business person, but the concepts taught there really helped me kind of give perspective and be able to talk to folks about environmental topics and issues that aren't environmental people. And it's one of those classes where it really is focused on the economics of things, but a lot of people are money driven. And so in my job, when we're trying to work with farmers or politicians to promote environmental things, whether it's putting restoration in the ground or getting land permanently conserved, it really essentially boils down to, is there enough money to do it, or is it going to impact a farmer's capability to do it? And so just having that perspective and being able to talk about environmental topics through the lens of economics has been entirely valuable to me.
Thank you so much to Kelly, Anna, and Katie for joining us tonight. And thank you all to everybody at home for joining us. Hopefully, this was helpful as you think about your future college and also your future career path. So, again, if you had a question tonight that we were unable to answer live, your admissions counselor will reach out later and make sure to get back to you as long as we have your name associated with that question. And then also, we've talked a lot about the Center for Environment and Society tonight. We have a session coming up. It is one of our Meet WC sessions with the Center for Environment and Society, and it'll be on November 5th. And actually, in that chat, we just sent out a link. So you're welcome to visit that link and sign up if you're interested. They'll explain more about those hands-on opportunities that all of our panelists took part in. And then finally, we also have another open house coming up. It's going to be on November 10th. So the link to that is also in your chat if you are interested in signing up. But thank you all so much for coming again and have a great night.